Welcome to Raw and Refined, the Gentleman's Hour, where we're going to have engaging conversation with middle-aged black men about what's going on. We welcome you to listen, like, comment, and subscribe with the hope that we will encourage others to join us for future conversations. We always like to start off with a toast. And with that toast, it's because we're gentlemen and we like to do it raw and refined.
All right, fellas. Well, let's go ahead and toast this up today. Being how the weather has been an influence on things at this time, I went with a hot toddy that people can adjust to their liking. But I did a maple tea that we got from Canada. It's delicious, man. It's a maple tea from Canada. Added some lemon, some honey. And for those that want to take it up a notch, I don't know if you've heard of Winter Jack. Winter Jack comes in a white bottle and they have a cider flavor that you add about an ounce to that. Knock out whatever you got going on, at least for the moment.
Feeling no
to
pain.
you. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Say permanent. Ain't nobody worried about permanent. Just get me right now.
Warm you up in many ways.
Rat now. Talk about rat now. That's
what y'all got. What you doing today?
Well, for me, I started these sort of seltzer things, Topo Chico, and this is a non-alcoholic one, but it's really, really cool. It's like a twist with grapefruit in it. You can get them now with alcohol in them, but it's basically sparkling water, and obviously it's Mexican, but it's Topo Chico. It's very refreshing and very addictive on top of it. So I'm rocking with the Topo Chicos today.
Excellent.
Nice. Well, I'm in just my basic hydration mode right now because I had coffee earlier today. Did that, which I don't do often, more often than not. If I've got a hot beverage, it's usually tea, but did do some coffee today. So right now I'm just hydrating. So I got my Yeti filled with my homemade Gatorade like elixir. The water, lemon juice,
right?
The water, the lemon juice, a little bit of the salt, and a little stevia.
Right. There you go. There you go.
Keeps me hydrated there, brother. So that's all I'm doing for right now, getting the body back right, because that coffee it messes with the hydration levels and stuff, especially when you don't do it all the time. It's kind of the same approach I have when I drink alcohol, because I don't drink that often. So when I do, I'm making sure that I got, along with the beverage, I got some water with it.
Always good to hydrate with that as well. So great point.
Trying not to be all mean to the body. Trying to do right bad on occasion. So we're gonna jump on into things today. We're talking about something, and this is an interesting topic, I think, and it came out of some. Well, we had a good year this year in Chicago in terms of NFL football. Right there, the Chicago Bears did their thing.
Bear down.
It was interesting, and I'm gonna point right here because that's where the logo is gonna pop up. Bink. Well, I shouldn't say logo. I should say the design that we created and posted on the page right before that last game. It was kind of dope. So they saw it. So Caleb did his thing.
Props to Caleb. He did it.
He did his thing. There were some cats last season that fairly were questioning him on some levels because the accuracy was kind of all over the place, right? I mean, he's got sacked a whole bunch. That wasn't always his fault. Sometimes he may have held on to the rock a little long, but when you got Swiss cheese for a line, it's kind of hard to not run for your life. There was all in all, this season was an incredible step up from last season. This was a great season for the Bears. Chicago Bear fans were excited, all phases, Ben Johnson, blah, blah, etc. Right? All right, dope season, right? So, but one of the things that kept kind of hanging around in the background through all of this, and it was interesting when Greg mentioned it once, and we talk about the text thread that the three of us have and have had consistently for years. And this was something Greg mentioned, and it was something that I'd seen too. I'd see it in like comments on Facebook and stuff like that. People would give Caleb his props and they would say things like, and even with the fingernails, or I'm not going to hold the nails against him, or, and all this. And this is in reference to the fact that the brother usually always had his nails painted on different colors, right? Some might not have known that he was doing it and it was an homage to his mom, because his mom, lifelong nail tech, I don't want to misstate the profession and what she was, but some call them nail techs and things like that. She hooked up nails for a living. And so he did that as an homage to his mom, right? Because she was a mom who supported him always and helped him get to where he was going to become this league leading quarterback already. But the nails, for some people, it's a real sticking point, right? And so that was kind of the jump off, and it got us to thinking about this concept of masculinity, right? And looking at, so we were kind of bouncing around and talking about, are there differences generationally? Is there differences on racial lines and all kinds of different things? It just was like, this could make for an interesting conversation. So we decided we were going to jump all into this. So what we got today is masculinity, performance, and who gets to define strong, right? So masculinity is one of those words everybody thinks they understand until you ask them to define it. Today's conversation started with something small, a quarterback, painted fingernails, and a reaction from some fans that felt maybe outsized. And the more we sat with it, the clearer it became that it really wasn't about football. Football might have been the vehicle for this, but it's really about strength. And who gets to define it? Who gets to say what is strength? And why some expressions of masculinity are questioned while others are celebrated, even when the evidence says otherwise. So we're going to talk sports today. We're going to talk race. We're going to talk culture and power. But more than anything, we're going to talk about the rules, the spoken and unspoken, that shape how men are allowed to show up. This is raw and refined. So let's get into it.
Sounds good, brother. Great intro to this topic. I think it's something that's going to bring out a lot of conversation and thoughts and ideas. And what you said earlier about generationally, be great to hear some comments as we go along with our conversation today as well.
Yeah. So Caleb sort of being the spark, Caleb Williams being sort of the spark this conversation really, really is interesting. And by the way, Caleb has kind of faced this type of attention, at least since his time at USC when he won the Heisman Trophy. I can remember vividly, I don't remember what game it was, but I remember it was a game that he lost. And after the game, he jumped into the stands and was crying with his mom. This is him as a college quarterback. I think he had won the Heisman the year before, and he was considered to be a generational player, right? Going to be had won the Heisman, was likely to be a #1 draft choice. But him jumping into the stands and crying with his mother really landed with a certain segment of the population in a way that was really interesting and in some ways troubling to me. And then you added in this idea that he was painting his nails. And so it became a whole thing around Caleb that continues to this day about his masculinity, and particularly for a violent sport like football. What does it mean that Caleb Williams paints his nails and he cries to his mom when he loses? And so it was this cottage industry of, should he even be the first pick because he's kind of soft and not the strongest guy in the world? And so the tone and the language of the critique of Caleb really started before he even got into the NFL, that only got louder once he did get into the NFL. And it just occurred to me, here's a guy who was an exceptional talent, played a position that's the hardest position perhaps in any team sport, yet the critique of him was that somehow he was not masculine enough because he cried and got emotional and painted his nails. And so it just occurred to me that there's a conversation that is happening, whether we're participating in it or not, about what it even means to be masculine or what it means to be tough in our society and in our culture. And so Caleb was kind of the spark, I think, for this conversation, but it's obviously bigger and has been a longer question and debate that precedes Caleb.
I think GK during our conversation, as you bring up those points, it just shows, and we'll talk more, I'm sure, about the difference generationally about this. We talked about this in other episodes of we used to just have to suck those tears up, be quiet, stop crying, toughen up, and that's what we grew up with. So when you see that vulnerability opening up now, definitely
Yeah.
much more than what it did when we were coming up, that questions, okay, what is masculinity, like you said? So this is what kind of helped us to come with this conversation. But I appreciate, at least from what I can tell so far, that Caleb at least feels comfortable with his vulnerability as well. He will cry, and crying is totally fine to be able to do that and express those feelings. But yet he's out there on the field playing one of the hardest sports out there to play. And then quarterback, you are considered the leader. So you are leading this team regardless of all of that as well. And he has
Mm-hmm.
no shame in his game when it comes to his nails. And when he explained what that meant, he really, let's be real, he didn't have to explain anything to
Right.
anybody. But society as it is felt that needed an explanation. And he gave it and let us know that this is in honor to his mom.
Yep.
And that's why he does it. I think it's amazing that we are seeing young men at this time feeling more comfortable
Yep.
in their vulnerability, which now defines a new aspect of masculinity, in my opinion, as well.
Well, it's funny. He's not the first one to do it. He's not even the first one in his generation to do it. I think it was Jalen Green, who played for the Rockets, had a certain amount of attention given to him because he was doing the same thing. And of course, we all know that Dennis Rodman took it to
Right.
higher heights
Right.
in the 90s, where it wasn't simply painting his nails. He actually wore a dress.
Right.
Took photos with a dress on.
Right.
And so this whole question is it's always been an interesting thing to reflect on. And I think the generational question is an important one too. But it's also important to remember that he's not the first one to bend
Right.
those rules a little bit.
And let's go back, man. I mean, earrings. Let's think about when earrings first started coming out and guys were wearing earrings and questioning, well, what side are you wearing it on and what does that mean? And
Right,
now
right.
you wearing it on both sides. Like, okay,
Yeah.
well, who was wearing? MJ, Michael Jordan. I mean, one of the powerhouses out there had an earring. So
Yep.
now it becomes more acceptable because you're seeing figures that you consider to be masculine enough to do that. And it's like, oh, okay, I think I can wear one now too. And it becomes mainstream. It's just a form of jewelry and accessory now that men wear as well. But yeah, I mean,
I think
Yeah, I
the
think.
one thing about Caleb, sorry, Hollis,
Go ahead.
the one thing I'll say about Caleb that really sort of brought it home for me this past season isn't simply the fact that it's football. It's the fact that he is a tough dude. People don't even realize he hasn't missed a single game, right? For all of the sacks he took last year, like some record number of sacks, right? Like you talk about the embodiment of physically tough to have not missed a single game since he got in the league in 2 years. That to me is the very embodiment, the physical and mental toughness that it takes to just have accomplished that should put all of that nonsense to rest. Alas, it has not.
Well, let's be real about one thing, and that is that athleticism isn't necessarily masculine, right? And what I mean is you could be a man who's an incredible athlete, but be otherwise very feminine in your behavior. So it's not inherently masculine to be very athletic. Part of his success is because he's, in most cases, one of, if not the most athletic cats on the field. At every level, it has been that way. We saw that this season with his escapability. Last year, that athleticism wasn't saving his butt because he had a Swiss cheese line. That's where that mental toughness piece came in. Not only was he taking all of those hits, he was hopping up and he was not blaming his line. He was not getting mad at his teammates. He was not showing frustration towards anybody. It was simply, it is what it is. We'll talk about how much that hurt later. Come on, we got another play to do. So that piece of it, I think for me, was that leadership piece. He absorbed all of that. Who knows? He might have got on the phone with his mom and cried a little later because he got hit really hard about 42 times in that game or something like that because he was taking some shots. But in terms of leading that team and showing all of those cats that I got your back and we're going to continue to push this forward, he was an incredible leader in that respect, I think. So very, very impressive. But to your point, it took mental fortitude, physical toughness on an extremely high level to do all of that. And then I think in that off season, he put that other side of that leadership piece was that him figuring out and working on what do I need to do so that I don't have to go through that again. So it was impressive all around, but it's not just about him while we're talking, but part of it is because of that, right? Because a lot of that really was very emotional for people. But for the success, how many brothers would have forgiven that? Right. Because I mean, like literally, I'm seeing one of the responses I saw from multiple people was because they were winning, there was acceptance even despite the nails, or even though he's got them like that, he the man now. If they weren't having that success, would they be as cool with the nails then? Right.
Exactly. I
don't
think
know.
he's a window into really sort of our broader societal issues around identity and as we're talking about masculinity, I would even say femininity too, or how we react to people that don't fit the stereotypes of certain expectations. And I think that that's part of it too. And I think that's also a generational thing, a shift that is happening. I think you've mentioned, Hollis, how Caleb has been an elite player for his entire life, right? And he didn't grow up in a stereotypical way. He had a lot of support from his family, his mom and dad. And so he developed, it seems anyway, from where I sit, an emotional intelligence that was purposeful and like sort of poured into him by his family and other folks. And it's just a different kind of kid than I think much of America is used to, that I think a lot of us might be used to, that a lot of folks just haven't seen at that scale in a public way.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah. Because
definition wise, go ahead, Rick. I'm sorry.
I was just thinking about this notion of what should matter more. Is it expression or performance? Right. And so that was going back to what I was saying. If he hadn't performed as well this year, would people have more of an issue with his expression? And at what point should that matter? Right. They should kind of exist parallel, right? This is how he expresses himself. This is how he plays or performs. But that's where we're at.
To add to that, I'm just going to say that look at masculinity, femininity, as you brought it up, GK, is that it's really defined by how society expects someone to behave, either as a male being masculinity, as a female as it relates to femininity, but there are definitely traits that we all share in some form or fashion as well. And I think you're right, Rich, when you said if he didn't do as well, would that be more highlighted about, here we go again, does he have the ability, strength to really be able to carry this Bears team, to the next level?
Or is he too busy buffing?
Right, exactly, type deal. Versus, whatever, that needs to be the QB1 for the Bears and help us get this next level appearance and hopeful championship down the road as well too. So it's all about expectations, man, and that's why I really appreciate this conversation. I had to kind of understand really what we were trying to talk about today. Hopefully, we're shaping this up for for our audience as to different aspects of what masculinity looks like, and as of now, just kind of starting off with Caleb Williams and all he was able to achieve, as we do celebrate our Bears being Chicago team as well too.
Yeah, I think it provides a good jump off, and I think it really is. There's a lot of space for an interesting conversation in this.
Yeah.
You know, norms, right? That's a term that can run through this conversation quite easily and be important in a number of ways. Because when we're thinking about things like this, what we're talking about cultural norms, we're talking about business norms, we're talking about political norms, we're talking about social norms, all of this, right? This notion of groups kind of defining what is and what isn't, or what's supposed to be, or what's right, or what's in bounds, what's out of bounds, what's deviant, right? All kinds of different labels we could attach to these things that we're talking about. Because I'll throw one out there for me, right? Something that defines a man for me professionally, historically, right? I was a trial lawyer before I got into education. One of the things that drove me crazy was seeing a man walk into court with a shoulder bag. I'm old school. And this just happens to be sitting here because this is near my desk, but I'm old
you
school.
did used to make a big deal out of that.
This is supposed to be in your hand. You see, mine actually had some things for the straps, but you don't use them. You don't put that thing on your shoulder. You walk down the street and preferably with a bent arms, right? 90 degrees up here like that. I don't care how heavy it is. I don't care how much stuff you got in there.
But you've since evolved from that perspective. I'm gonna go out on a limb.
Yes, I'm going to say if it's really heavy, you know, you get the bag with the wheels on it, and you push that bad fella in while you've got your briefcase in your other hand or something. But so just a slight evolution on that particular issue.
Ain't nothing wrong with your messenger bags out there. That is,
if you're a messenger. If you're a messenger,
your back and shoulders and everything as well.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. If you're a delivery cat or something, but you walking into a court of law
with your backpack on.
Don't do that either. That's extra tacky. That's extra tacky. No, I've done that too on occasion, but no, in all seriousness. There's maybe a little evolution, but no, that's what we're talking about here, right? What defines what? Who gets to say what and why? And I'm gonna hammer that performance part a lot, because the reality is that we have historically allowed our high performers more room, right? We talked about it in an earlier episode where I was talking about us at Proviso East. Oh, you noticed that background, right?
That's right.
At Proviso East, during the basketball season, during my junior year, when we were going far into the state, our run to try to get downstate and we were playing well, arms within the school were relaxed. We got to wear our hats inside and walk around. But as soon as we lost, you better not have that hat on anymore, right? It was like, hey, what you doing, man? Take that off.
Right.
Hats in a bit.
Right. So something that was, performance based, but it's just an interesting thing. I think the amount of leeway that certain people get in society.
Long as you win it. Well, it's a fascinating thing because sports is usually one of the ways in which society sort of thinks about, like, it's so important as society sort of thinks about masculinity, right? Like sports is so central to so much of it all. And it's really a window, not so much just the sports, but our reaction to sports and athletes and all of that stuff. They are so interconnected that it is a good window to me in which we should wrestle with this question, because you can tell a lot about how people respond to people and like their views about certain things based upon the athlete that they like or the athlete that they don't like. To me, LeBron James is a sort of another example of a controversial, if you will, athlete whose persona as such is often questioned. Like, it's like, they call him Le Flop, or they call him he cries, like all these things about him. One of the ongoing memes about him is after he leaves a press event and he grabs his bag and walks out. And speaking of the bag with the handle, he grabs his bag and he walks out. So I don't even have to explain what I'm talking about.
Right.
And so that sort of that image of him as like questioning is very masculinity is fascinating for a guy who's 41 years old, has played at the highest level for 20 some years, is married with is that what is in fact masculinity if that's not it, right? Or an example of it.
And I think with that, for LeBron, so yeah, you guys know me and LeBron have our own differences type deal. I am definitely a MJ man, and that's my guy. That's gonna be
He
my
said
guy.
that like they've actually met and had actual beef.
Right.
Right?
Right, that's what I'm saying, right?
You know, so that's it. But
I'm
you
like,
know, I have
what
to say,
did you not tell us about?
you're right.
Right,
But I have
What
to
happened
say
at that
that
Charlotte game or something?
you
You know?
know, you right though. I give you what you said, Greg, about he has definitely played at a level for a long time that not many players can really say that as well. The question comes up, our
Nobody.
generation, I'll say to the new generation, could LeBron have survived? But in our generation of
Right.
playing with the Detroits and the Dallas and those players that when you came in, you can expect an elbow to your chest, to your face, and you had to just get up and play through it type deal.
Yep.
Hey, you know
Whereas
what?
in this time and era, it's like, well, dang, he can get hit and he flopping already type deal. So
Adapted to the rules of the time.
right,
He's adapted
it's
to the rules of the time.
adaptability.
Barkley said it. Isaiah
adaptability.
said it. Everybody would have been trying to avoid him.
Yes.
If he was playing during that era, he would have had the same body, but he would have had the same mentality as all of them because they would have been playing under the rules that they were playing under.
Right.
And if he would have been in that era, he would have been just like them. He would have been Karl Malone, but bigger and faster.
Yep.
Right.
Literally,
everybody needs to squash
the
that
same
mess.
size guy.
And that's
right?
the thing. So that's all, you know, and that's where I think you're going to have whatever those comparisons are as it relates to that. But really what I was getting at with that is that brings to question again how we look at masculinity. So is it the level of trauma? Is it the level of damage? Is it the level of how you rise from that? Versus just your ability to truly be who you are in that era of space that we're in at that time. You see what I'm saying? So I just said that to say it like that because it was a different time then. We didn't, you know, it's not 140-point games that we see every night type deal. You were great if you got 100. That was an amazing game type deal. Now that's almost expected that you should be, you know, scoring 100 points a game and stuff. But it was definitely a different game at that time, and even before him, it was a different game before MJ was in there as well. So there's evolution in all of this as well, but. Yeah, to get back to LeBron, I think he has done tremendous for the game of basketball as well. I'm still not going to be on the bandwagon, but I think he does have the statistics and the background to support him being one of the greats.
Yep.
Well, I think this notion of old school versus new school cuts across all kinds of different things, right? And one of the things that you touched on, John, as I was looking in the notes was really what this note said: old masculinity glorifies suffering, mature masculinity values adaptation. And so putting that in simpler terms, that's why so many people pick Jordan over LeBron, because Jordan's from that time when everybody was stealing on everybody, right? So they say that it was they say they were tougher, right? Because you saw how Scotty rolled up out of that game with the big old this was his forehead, right? That knot he had on there, and he kept playing. When in today's game, they would have rushed Scotty to the hospital. He wouldn't have been able to continue playing.
Exactly.
Right?
Concussion
And
protocol and everything. Right.
Exactly. Dude's knot was as big as, I mean, it was almost like that off his forehead. I mean, let's be real. You shouldn't still keep playing.
Right.
When you got a knot that big on your forehead.
We should know better now, right?
Right. But that's valued, right? That's your level of toughness. Tough beyond the point of stupid, really. But that's valued to a certain degree. But again, like I said on the LeBron thing, if LeBron was playing during that time, he would have been throwing the same kind of bows, swinging the same kind of, giving the same kind of shots that everybody else was giving at that time with that body. So I think everybody, whether you considered soft or not, everybody was given at that same level because that's how everybody played. Like you said, even before Jordan, it got more physical. It's changed over time. Before Jordan's got in there, it was even more physical, right? And part of that is because of the level of athleticism. Over time, the average player is far more athletic than they were 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. The average player during Jordan's time was not as athletic as Jordan. That's part of the reason why he stood out. Everybody wasn't that athletic. There were some who were, but the average NBA player now is about as almost as athletic as Jordan was. The average NBA player, right? And then you've got those extra special freaks of nature that stand out above them. And LeBron is right up there at the top of that pile because if you look at how long he's still doing it, and he had his head up at the rim the other day, right? In a game I saw watch. So that part is incredible. But when we think about this notion of part of it, what we're dealing with is what's required, this level of toughness that's acceptable or required has shifted. Because to me, it's crazy to think that the only way for people to fully accept him is if he were able to transport himself back in time and dominate back then. And then more of those people would be as accepting of him. I don't need that.
Well,
It's
I
real
think
interesting, though.
that it's only because this is a time that is different for everybody. And I relate this to how we've talked before about our generation is that sandwich generation. Again, we're experiencing things that no one else is going to quite probably experience the way we have. So, taking care of our parents while trying to raise kids and take care of ourselves, seeing how basketball has come into play to where it is now. We've lived through all of that, being able to hear it on the radio, but see it on TV, going to games, and now streaming. You see much more than what was seen before us. And who knows what that's going to look like after us. But we're kind of that first generation to truly experience those different viewpoints of things as well. And this is where, back to the masculinity conversation, I think that's where that evolution just has to take place. That adaptability has to take place. Seeing men being more vulnerable is what we are encouraging because we know that's healthy for men to be able to express that. But back in the day, that wasn't what was being taught. That wasn't
Stop
what was
crying.
being shown.
You better
Right.
stop
It was
crying. Let me
stop
give you
crying,
something to cry
toughen
about.
up. Right. Exactly. Type deal. And that's how we viewed masculinity, at that point type deal. And if you crying, you were a crybaby. You were this, you were that
You
type deal.
soft.
You
You
soft.
soft.
Right. Type deal. But nowadays, that's like, no, you need to be able to express how you feel. And you need to do that. And that's okay. And that's strength in being
In
able
some
to do
settings.
that. In some settings as
Still not
well.
acceptable everywhere.
Well, and it's not, but I think
And
that's
that's
part
part of
of
the
the
challenge.
evolution as well, too. Right.
And I think we have to start demanding it too. That
Right.
we need to make it let's say, normalize it. Right? We need to normalize the ability of people to express themselves, how they choose to express themselves. And because I just feel like part of what's wrong with the culture is that the emotions don't go away. You just sort of paper over them. And the impact is far more corrosive over time because you're papering over them. So to me, I feel like I have learned over time it's better to sort of get them out or be able to deal with them opposed to sort of somehow hiding them or paper overing them, because eventually they will reveal themselves.
I
And
think part of the
usually it's
challenge,
in a self-destructive way.
I'm sorry, GK, for jumping in a little quick there, but I think part of the challenge is for a lot of men, first off, is even understanding what those emotions are, because that's not something they've ever been taught to deal with.
Right.
The only acceptable emotion for a lot of men is anger.
Right.
That's the only one that's been considered socially acceptable in most settings. Is for a man to get angry. A lot of men filter all of their other emotions through an angry lens. And so, because that's the only emotion that's acceptable, that's the only one that they think is supposed to come out. And so the only way for the other things to come out is cloaked in anger or misinterpreted because they don't know how to deal with these other ones. The first level and the first key is being able to have a full a full emotional vocabulary, right?
Yep.
You were using that
Mm-hmm.
term emotional intelligence earlier, understanding the difference between anger and other
Mm-hmm.
emotions, right? And not confusing things like the pleasure from sex with being happy or something
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Emotions versus physical expressions, things like
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important for boys to learn that they have a full spectrum of emotions and learn how to interpret them and learn how to express them early on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're kind of built with that to a certain degree, but because we are socialized to only express anger, the other ones get kind of use it, you lose it to a certain degree.
It's a
And so
muscle
right,
that you
and you
got to
don't
Mm-hmm.
build.
learn them fully, and so I think that can be a challenge, and I think generationally that impacts men, right? If you're being taught
Mm-hmm.
by men that this is what a man is supposed to do, if the men that are teaching you only know this, then that's all that you might learn, unless you stumble across it in some other sources or some other places. So,
Yep.
I wonder, this is so interesting, bros, because as we talk about this, I keep reflecting on who started that. How did started saying that, okay, as a man, you aren't allowed to show emotions of caring or sadness or concern type deal. And where did that stem from? The only society being a westernized society
Mm.
that really perpetrate that. I'd be curious to hear from our audience, from different societies and different cultures. How was that through the years type deal? Because again, what's wrong with a man showing their emotion, but yet does that mean they can't be a provider? Does that mean they can't be a protector? Does that mean they can't be the one
Mm.
that is still managing the care of the family just because they're showing emotions? How
Mm-hmm.
did that actually ever come about to be like, well, dag, if you crying, you soft, you're not going to be able to protect your family? Who said that?
Mm-hmm.
How did that ever
Mm-hmm.
come about that
somebody
that
got
has
chose as
become
the
the
victim
acceptable
because they
norm
looked
type
soft or
deal?
whatever, and so it started happening.
You had
People
to
who
Mm-hmm.
look
show
hard. You had to look hard. You had to keep,
or you
or
Yep.
else somebody gonna mess with you if you're not
Yep.
looking hard type deal. And it's those
Well,
when you're
type
it's
dealing
a
with
great.
things.
people with lacking resources, that's becomes a reality, right?
Well,
Right.
I
When
think it becomes a survival. It's a
right,
survival mechanism, if you will. Like we
was if it's not
or
still
was
now,
exactly.
yeah.
I think, and actually, I think it probably still is to an extent. But I just think about just growing up, how I did, how we did. There were cliques even in high school, right? Like I was part of the house clique, right? And the way we dressed and the way we hung out, the things we did, they were made fun of because for some people, they weren't considered masculine. And then there was another track of people who were doing other things that were considered more masculine than what we were doing and the way we were dressing. So,
Mm-hmm.
there's always been these various current, and I think part of it is just some of it is just survival stuff. People, and then you find your group, and then you just kind of do what you got to do to be with that group, because with that group, you're more likely to survive, and you have camaraderie, and you build community with that group. There was some rough times in high school that
Mm-hmm.
we lived through, or at least felt like they were rough times. People making fun of you because of how you dressed,
Mm-hmm.
or the things that you did or liked. Yeah, and we're not even getting into how sexual orientation plays out
Mm-hmm.
and the violence that the LGBTQ folks have had to endure over the years. We're not even talking about trans people and
Mm-hmm.
how those things really continue to really impact people's sense of safety and how they're feeling comfortable expressing themselves. So I don't have an answer to your question, John, about where it came from, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still very much a part of the culture. But I think we have the opportunity now to normalize something else. And I think that's one of the things we hope to get out of this conversation.
Well, and I appreciate that, GK. I appreciate you bringing that aspect of it as well, because that's a very significant aspect of this conversation too. And part of leading into our next comment is that it's because we're still getting pushback or blocking from white males that are trying to lead this country. They're trying to silence that, trying to quiet that, trying to say again that no, that's not acceptable. And here now we're having to again redefine, okay, what does masculinity mean and what does that need to look like based on, unfortunately, in my opinion, who we have currently in position of leadership for our society. So
Mm-hmm. 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 Well, we know that our country is in the midst of a pretty radical backlash, if you will, in terms of what it even means to be masculinity. Again, the attacks on trans people, the attacks on LGBTQ folks. So the whole thing about Caleb, to me, all of that has to be looked at in the same context because it really is a reflection of the broader society. We have a person in office now who the people you talk to that support him, what they love about him is that he's aggressive in his words, he's aggressive in his approach, and that I know people say he's a man's man, right? Like there's a way in which that sort of type of, or that the perception of that as masculinity is what makes him strong and attractive for a whole bunch of people.
That's so interesting. And it made me think about something I wanted to share with you all really quickly. It's a screen capture from my TV when I was watching TV the other day. And have you seen this commercial? It's for some kind of a
Enhancement.
For enhancement, right?
No, it's for a particular aftershave or something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, geez. Okay.
But it's called He Lives in Manlandia. And so the notion is he's this really masculine dude. You see, he's got his big tomahawk and all of that. So
He's got his lazy boy.
Yeah.
Right.
So just when you were talking about, you were just introducing race into the conversation. And so I thought that was this notion of Black men must prove their masculinity. We're not supposed to be emotional. We're supposed to be stoics, right? And why? Because historically that made the white people more comfortable. If just any show of emotion, that's volatile. That he's not able to control himself, and therefore that means he's a danger to me. Let's set aside the reality of who was actually violent, but this notion of everything is going to be scrutinized. Everything is going to be scrutinized, right? We've seen this historically. It's just in the post-Michael Vick did it really become everybody, again, the performance, right? Made things more acceptable. And this wasn't necessarily about masculinity, but just the explosion of the athletic Black quarterback. Post-Michael Vick, all of a sudden, everybody wanted one. Didn't nobody want one before that. But then they was like, wow, I mean, did you see just the kind of things you could do if we could just get one that isn't into the dog fighting or whatever and all of the other stuff that we might be able to control a little better?
Right.
But that shift we saw because that performance, that level of performance, and then now we're seeing all of these Black quarterbacks that are thinking. They're just not running fast. They don't just have laser arms. They have those too, but they think. And they do all of the things. They lead, all of that stuff, but they're still scrutinized at a level that we don't see with white quarterbacks. It's really interesting. And I love the fact that I've been going back and really looking at that Beyond the Draft episode that we did last May, because I've started working on editing the video so we could put that out there for our listeners and viewers, and thinking about some of the things that we talked about in that context last year. But there were segments of it where we were focused really on that level of scrutiny for us versus them. You know, that thing is still very true. We've got to be twice as good, but they want us to remain half as expressive. When white athletes just, that is acceptable. But when we do that, there's decorum. We need some decorum, right?
Josh Allen, after Buffalo lost, had a full-on cry, and I thought that was great. But I didn't see the type of critique of him that I've seen of other athletes. And there's one other aspect to this. Again, keep going back to sports. It tells so much about us, but it's beyond that. Thinking about it from thinking about gender versus like masculinity and femininity. So I'm thinking about WNBA players, for example, and the types of critiques that they get just for simply being basketball players, that that somehow they are hyper masculine because they play basketball. There are women who play basketball. It's always been this weird thing that, again, this whole question of masculinity, what does it mean? Like, who does it apply to? And one of the way, like even beyond basketball and sports, one of the most ridiculous and disgusting ways I've seen it is the way that some of them have talked about some Black women. And I can think about Michelle Obama in particular in ways that are really, really troubling, stuff that you'll see. And some of the outrageous Serena Williams and like all these Black women, right? To me are just women athletes or just brilliant women that, as a way to tear them down, they get sort of categorized as masculine. Like, what is that about, right?
Well, if nothing else has worked, so we got to try that too, because it's ultimately what you're saying. It's about the tearing down. It's about the threat. It's about the power that they possess, that internal power, that internal strength that shines through. And so nothing else seems to work. So we got to throw that at it too, to try and slow them down, to try and break them down. Interesting you mentioned the WNBA, because there are a lot of people who now will openly say right now the WNBA is far more physical than the NBA is. And I think sometimes it's a little too physical. It's a little, but
yeah, the refs don't have control of the game like they should.
Sometimes they don't have control. Sometimes I think it's being allowed because it creates a little more sensationalism. I think with the league where it's at right now, trying to justify paying more and doing this and that.
Well,
some of the
John, I go into
going on.
What I've heard Black female doctors tell me, and it's that there's also this notion that somehow Black women don't experience pain like others do. Right. So there's that
old leftover justification for mistreating people that's been around for so long.
Right. Right. So it's all of
I'm sorry, John.
Again.
I'm sorry. Just real quick. That also goes to the WNBA thing, to keep that division between the Black and the white players. And every time Caitlyn got fouled, right, it was the biggest, most ridiculous, evil thing. They're trying to kill her.
And I'm a Caitlyn fan. She's a Hawkeye.
Yeah, I know. I'm a Caitlyn fan too. I'm a fan of her game. Her maggots kind of ruined it for a while there because they don't love the game. They didn't care about the game, and they just came in and just kind of messed things up. But what we did see was she was taking the same knocks that everybody else was taking. Because the WNBA is just almost hockey-like in the way they let them get at it sometimes. But to your point, Greg, and I apologize for cutting you off there, John, was just this notion that every time something happened to her for a while, it was getting blown way out of proportion when everybody was getting stole on, like back in the 90s NBA. When you watch some of them WNBA games, it's like, whoa. And when the refs didn't get control of it, these ladies was taking the matters into their own hands. And everybody was getting clocked. And it's like, hey, if you're not going to call this foul and you're going to let her clock me like that, I'm clocking her too. And it was getting crazy at times. I'm sorry, John, you were about to say something.
No. I think as we're having the conversation, if we look at this, we said was that a lot of this is based on societal expectation. And if we go even deeper, it's who's controlling those expectations. Who is it that's bringing the definitions out? You see what I'm saying? And you said it, Rich, that it's a matter of if it fits the narrative that they want you to have. So it's going to come into question masculinity. Are you man enough to take care of this, that, or the other? Or you too, man like that it's taken away from your feminine ability and who you're supposed to be as it relates to what they want you to be type deal. So I think that as we continue to just have that conversation about masculinity, femininity, it's a matter of what you feel comfortable with. I think it's a matter of how you're able to be adaptable to whatever that need is. So I say that to say, I need to be able to be vulnerable when I'm taking care of a patient that's not feeling well. I can't be stoic. I can't be hard. I can't be like, suck it up, you're going to be all right type deal. I got to show a caring side, a softer side in order to be able to help them through what they're going through. But then if somebody's threatening to my family or somebody that I care closely about, well, that's a side of me that you're going to see step up that you may not see as you see me trying to take care of a patient that may be going through some health or illness type deal.
Mm-hmm.
So that masculinity is still there. It's just a matter of what aspect of it is being presented at that time. And I think, again, unfortunately, we've got those that are trying to define it for everyone.
Yeah.
But in essence, that's a narrative that's trying to keep people down, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah,
I see it as an attempt at control and power over people. When you get to pigeonhole people as a certain way, that means you get to dismiss them, what they're going to do and how they are expected to behave. But it's really, really oppressive, and we have systems in place that enforce that oppression. And I think we as a society have to do a better job. And I think us as Black men have a particular role to play in sort of dismantling that kind of oppression and those kinds of systems that at the end of the day are harmful to people and the broader society,
Right.
you know.
I agree.
Yeah, we're dealing with this reality of this is 2020. So we got that fool up there that's got all kinds of things convoluted, but it's really not just that fool, right? It's been this way, moving this way for quite some time,
Yeah.
right? And so we're not going to put it all on a single fool. We're going to deal with the reality, right? This hyper-masculine, conservative white male archetype, right? For it to be an archetype, it's got to be a lot of them doing it, right? You can't just have 5 or 6 people to have an archetype. It's not often I get to use that word, so I'm throwing it out there. So what we're saying is masculinity.
How
and
masculine of you to do that, Rich.
Well, thank you, brother. In this particular archetype, right, masculinity is defined by certainty, volume, and dominance, right? Bigger, louder, and stronger, right? Kind of notion, right? Merit is pretty much irrelevant. Performance doesn't matter nearly as much as posturing, right? America, right? I don't actually have to be good. Yeah, I don't have to be good at anything or do anything good. I just have to say I'm good. How do you know? Because I said it. And why'd you say it? Because I am. Why? And that's good enough, right? That seems to be good enough. And apparently it was because it got that fool in there. And that's pretty much all he's ever done. In reality, not masculine at all, right? I don't think you can be masculine on a diet that consists mostly of McDonald's. I think we get back to that ooey gooey, soft and chewy we were talking about before, right? Just one big old marshmallow puff, right? Not the most masculine of things. But seriously, we see that this emotional volatility.
It's a strange thing. It's so strange.
It's because he's in charge. It's just that as simple as that.
Well, I remember when John McCain, I remember when he went after John McCain. And I've had all kind of policy differences with the late John McCain, but how in the world could anybody question his toughness? Like, how is that possible? This man was a POW for how many months? Literally couldn't move his arms or legs.
He wasn't a rich celebrity, man. The world is flipped upside down and on its side and twisted over twice after that.
But
he
a
wasn't
guy
a
who
celebrity.
literally got a deferments
Right.
get to question that person's toughness and
because he was out
masculinity.
there telling people you're fired and lying about
it's
his
bizarre.
assets. But that's all it takes is to be, if you can be on TV long enough, that pervasive image everywhere is all it takes for some people. And if it's enough of those people, boom, you got a norm, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to make sense for, right? How many, well, this world we're living in right now, right? The majority rules sets the rules. And if the majority is all idiots, you get idiotic rules.
Well, and really, I don't even know if it's truly majority ruling. So I hear what you're saying, but I think there's a lot of quietness and there's just some people that have said they gonna rule and do what they do. But but I get what you're saying. No, I agree.
In a
with
broken
that, though,
system,
Rich.
we had enough. We had in a broken system, there were large enough numbers in enough places, to end up with a jacked up result. But
well, I think this has
he
been
he won all of those elections.
He did. And when you look at the gender variation, it's just a fascinating thing to examine. And this conversation is great, and I think it could continue to go. And I'd love to have some of our viewers/listeners weigh in. Obviously, we can't get to every aspect of the conversation, but hopefully it inspires you all to engage with us and engage with each other about what I think is a conversation, even if it's not articulated as a conversation, but it's happening everywhere. And so hopefully this will be part of moving the conversation forward. But one thing I keep coming back to is that if masculinity really was as we say it is, or as society says it is, it wouldn't need all of the policing, right? It wouldn't be threatened by expression, right? It actually wouldn't collapse under deep analysis. But it's so weak and questionable in its foundation that it needs enforcement by systems, by people, by those in power. So it's not as strong as it pretends to be. And so I think our job is to resist it and try to build something better.
I think we end up getting to that individual, right, is where we could be. Norms matter less when we are focused more on, and there are some places and spaces where the individual should be less important than the community or the group. But when we're talking about expression, that's one of those places where the individual should kind of reign paramount. That's in a place where we got a kind of universal acceptance, though. And I think we're so far from that because there's so much focus on control. And then there are so many that are willing to be controlled, or who or are willing to comply, are willing to fall in line and say, okay, I'll give up that personal expression. I know I've done that at different points in my life, and just out of necessity, career necessity, right? I remember when we were talking with the nephews, and I talked about how at that time when I still had hair, I would have been able to wear my hair like so many brothers do now.
Right.
You know, when I was going to court, that would have been dope looking back on it. But that conformity and things of that nature that limit us, sometimes by choice, sometimes by pressure.
Yeah, and just remember again to our audience, we thank you. This was not us trying to decide for you what masculinity is. This was there to bring out the conversation and in hopes of encouraging us and others to just recognize that masculinity has a broad definition to it. We are there to try to be open to what that looks like and to be able to feel free in that expression of that as well. So again, think about this. Who taught you what it means to be masculine? And do you still conform to that today? And does that pass down to those that are younger than you, so your children or even your grandchildren, as to how that same perception falls? We would love to hear your comments. Please like, share, and just let us know what your thoughts are as it relates to this. We appreciate you all. And I think this is, again, hopefully a great episode, great conversation, and just there to open your eyes and your hearts and your minds as to just different concepts that are going on at this time.
That's right. Well, thank you all for checking us out. Appreciate my brothers, as always, for an inspiring conversation that could go so many different ways, but we'll continue talking and we'll keep bringing up the subjects.
Take care, everybody.
Peace.